I thought I'd go ahead and throw this video out here for you. This will be for Wednesday's class as we get into lesson 16, which is the failures of socialism, the history of it. And so, let's just turn this camera here a little bit. And so, this is going to be a really quick overview of the lesson. It's a short lesson, but it's about the history, the failure of socialism, the history. Now we talked about the theory, and now we're moving into the history of socialism. Now it could be that these socialistic leaders, remember socialism, it's a command economy. The government owns the resources, the factors of production, land, labor, capital, entrepreneurship. Those things are owned by the government. People don't own private property. The government owns property, and then it allocates it, it assigns it out to people for work. So now it could be, as you learned in our economics on our very first 2 weeks, we were establishing the foundation, and that is preferences, choices, people. It's a social science. It's not a natural science. We really can't say 100% it's always this way. For example, a socialistic leader, they may find themselves victims of let's see here. We learned in the last lesson the calculation problem of socialism. It could be that because of the calculation problem of socialism, it's created, it's made it very bad for the people. But the one thing we do have, because we can't measure socialism, we can't measure economic theory because it's a social science, we can look at the history. That's what we do have available to us. We have the history available to us, and we can look at the record to see what has happened. Now, you're going to read in the book on communism versus fascism, and communism, and I'm just going to look at that for you real quick on page 241. Communism seeks to establish government ownership over the means of production through a revolution of the working class. Fascism, which is another term for you, fascism seeks to establish absolute government control by the elite, by the property owners. So here's what your book is going to present. We have a thing that we call ideologies. Ideologies are ways that people look at things, and particularly economic systems. You've probably heard to the left and to the right, and you've probably always heard, and if you haven't, many people just say people to the left are liberal, people to the right are conservative. People to the left are Democrats, people to the right are Republicans, all right? But if you look at that a little more broadly for our economic, just for our economic context, communism, socialism, and communism are extreme left, all right? And remember, that is where the government owns the factors of production. There is no private property ownership. Everything's owned by the government and allocated by the government, and that is very far left thinking. However, very far right thinking, you can go from, you can go all the way to the right, to which is what fascism is. Fascism is where you have authoritarianism, you have an elite group who own property and control, and that extreme right is called fascism. And that is also part of socialism because it's government, again, controlling the factors of production. Even though there is private property, government is still controlling things. And so you can be far left and be a socialist. You can be far right a socialist. If you're far left, you're probably a communist. If you're far right, you're probably a fascist. Then your book mentions there's in-betweens. For example, and the book mentions some names here for you. For example, on the extreme left, Joseph Stalin, okay, and Mao Zedong, who I don't really know a lot about, but Joseph Stalin was one of the early communists. They would be to the left, all right, extreme left. To the extreme right, fascism, that would be like Adolf Hitler and Benito Mussolini, who was the leader of Italy, and both of those were like during World War II. Those would be extreme right fascists. Now, in between, you might find people, for example, and your book gives it, Barack Obama, he would be to the right of Stalin, okay? He would be considered more conservative than Stalin. But Barack Obama would be to the left of another famous U.S. president, Ronald Reagan, all right? But Ronald Reagan would be to the left of Adolf Hitler and Benito Mussolini. And so your book talks about these extremes, and then your book finishes out by giving you the broad numbers, socialism's body count, and there are statistics in there about how many people have died under socialistic regimes, whether it's a far left regime or whether it's a far right, the extremes, all right? And so that's what your book is talking about, and we are going to read an article that our beloved Mr. Cole blessed me with as an idea for our class. Last year he gave that to me. We're going to read that this year. It's called 100 Years of Socialism, 100 Million Dead. And it's written, and it gives just some incredible numbers about the number of people who have been crushed under socialism, whether by a leftist communist or by a rightist fascist. So that's what your book is talking about. I hope I haven't muddied up the waters. I hope this is a little more clear, gives you an idea of where we're going. It's a short lesson, lesson 16. So looking forward to going through this with you. So have a great, may your week be great. Get caught up on your work, and looking forward to having more conversations in these important lessons. Take care, and I'll see you soon.